The title is "The Truth Will Set You Free" or "Make You Free," and we'll talk about that a little bit. I'm going to set the scene. We just talked a little bit about this, but I think it's important always to set the scene, what's going on in Jerusalem, what's going on where this conversation is taking place. And I see these chapter 8 through 9 kind of taking place in a progression throughout the temple. Okay, this is one, he is in the temple and he's talking to him. It took place in the temple courts in Jerusalem at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay, and Jesus is becoming less parable and more blunt truth. Okay, so just give you an idea. Think about this conversation as it escalates, and from the Pharisees' points, it's going to get more heated. Okay, he's going to say things, and they're not even going to attempt to understand them. Okay, I'm sure none of us have ever had that experience. Okay, Jesus is speaking directly. He's speaking plainly. He's speaking straightly about knowing truth and the freedom that it gives. Okay, we're going to talk about two concepts here: truth and freedom, because they're way overused in our society. You know. And they're used incorrectly in my belief. Okay, I just picked this picture because I thought it pointed out that Jesus was talking, his disciples and some of his followers were there, and that's important to know. Even though the conversation takes place with the Pharisees, a lot of his followers who already believed in him are there, and a lot of his disciples are there. But he's talking. But you can see from the posture of the Pharisees that are represented there on the right. Some have their hands on their hip, they're bowed forward like they're getting in his face. Some of them are scratching their beard, kind of like, what's he saying? But the posture is, even though it's starting off subtly, it's not good. It's not the kind of posture you want to see when you're making a public presentation or something. Okay, who's this guy? Anybody know? Hamilton? Good guess.
Thomas Paine.
No, but that's another good guess.
Wilberforce.
Who?
Wilberforce.
I know that name, but I don't know. I don't know. Okay, I don't blame you.
You wouldn't have it up there.
I went to look for a picture of him and go, that's not what I remember him looking like. Okay. Patrick Henry.
Oh,
Okay.
you remember him? Wanted to clarify.
You're older than I thought.
So some of us study history, okay. But you know, when you see movies, sometimes that name or that face of the actor gets into your head, you know? So that's what I was thinking. And I love this quote, and you probably remember it. You probably had to memorize it, if I'm not mistaken. We're old enough that we had to memorize stuff like this. Okay. Is life so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? I care not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Isn't it? Is there a person in this room who doesn't wish they had a chance to make a speech like that, you know, and mean it and live for it? I mean, something like the United States of America come out of it. So anyway, the reason I bring him up is because I think he had a different idea of freedom. Okay. I think of freedom, and I think one of the ways to get so, oh man, be free, you know, and we have this kind of hippie mentality. I think of somebody going to San Francisco in the 60s and I can take all the drugs I want. I can have sex with anybody I want. I can do anything I want. I don't have the man to bother me and all that, you know, but is that really freedom? No, that's just sloppy living, you know? Okay. And that's where I think we get off in this country. We think all these things are free. Just nobody can tell me what to do and I can do whatever I want. Well, some of the things you want to do are pretty stupid and they'll lead to your destruction. Okay. So what is freedom? Is it being able to do whatever you want? Or is it living in a certain way that will allow you to be everything you can be, to be fulfilled and do everything that you're capable of and even more? And when I say even more, maybe it's because God will do even more in your life if you just live the way he asked you to live. He will do things you could never imagine, and he will let you do things that you can never imagine.
It's freedom from slavery to sin. It's freedom from slavery to sin.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where we're going with this. And freedom and slavery, two opposite ends, both direct opposites. Okay.
And it's also, it's cause and effect.
Mm.
Why do you want freedom? Because there is an outcome from freedom that you want.
Mhm,
and it's the fulfillment that you're talking about.
mhm.
But you're not gonna find that fulfillment in worldly ways.
Yeah.
In worldly sinful ways.
Yeah. And if you pursue freedom in that vein, in the worldly way, it's gonna lead to slavery. Or you're gonna be a slave to alcohol, you're gonna be a slave to drugs, you're gonna be a slave to sex, you're gonna be a slave to bad business practices, you're gonna be a slave to a whole bunch of other things. Okay, but if you follow the type of freedom we're gonna talk about, you have freedom in Jesus Christ, and he gives you the parameters to live your life because you're in his word and you know his word, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. Okay. Somebody want to read 31 and 32? And go ahead and read it with emphasis and kind of put your head up so we can record it if possible. 31 and 32.
To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Thank you. And by the way, you came out great on the recording, so that's good. And you speak with great emotion, so thank you. Okay, and so this seems like if we just read this, we would probably read right past it, wouldn't we? If we're not careful. But this is a 4-part discipleship course. And until I started reading in commentaries, I didn't realize it, but if you break it down, it does. So we'll talk about the 4 different parts in a little more detail, but the first one is belief. You have to have belief. Okay. And it says, for the Jews who believed in him, there were Jews that followed him into this conversation that had heard him before. And when Steve was talking last week, they had heard him before and they believed in him and into him. Okay, so they were committed to him now. Okay. The people that are hearing him today in this part of the lesson, maybe you're not committed to him yet, but he's telling them they need to be committed to him. So the first part is belief. Second part is continue in his word. Okay, that's very important. A lot of people go, hey, this is great. This is the next big thing. The new shiny object, Jesus is really neat. And then when Jesus is not there, they fall away. But if you become committed to his word, that's Jesus on paper. That's what he has left for us so that we can know him. Okay, so we have to continue in his word. And I think this class has continued in his word for a number of years. And I hope that that's what we're doing by the way we're teaching now, is continuing his word and digging into it. Okay, so that's the second part. If you abide in my word, you will know the truth. So that's how we know the truth, by abiding in his word. That's where truth lies. Doesn't lie in the world. It doesn't lie in what political leaders are telling us. Sorry, I tried not to giggle when I said that. And that's from both sides. As we get into this, once you know the truth, and we'll make this point a little bit later, you begin to have discernment and wisdom, and you can decipher when somebody is not telling you the truth, or they're shading the truth, or telling you the half truth.
And this sequence here is so important.
Mhm.
You cannot know the truth if you don't do the first 2 things.
Bingo. And we're going to get into these a little bit more in detail so you know what we're talking about. But this is a process. I mean, think about in your own life what this process has taken. I feel everybody here in this class has accepted Christ as their savior. So we've all been through this process. But in some cases, it took us from 8 years old to 40 years old. Some of them didn't take us that long. Some of us, it took longer, but it's a process for each and every one of us. Okay. Okay. And the truth will set you free, but you have to know the truth. But to know the truth, you have to study and continue in his word and examine the evidence of Jesus Christ. Okay. So, has anybody ever read that and seen 4 parts in there? Okay. He's telling you about a process. So if you want to highlight something in your Bible, that's a thing you can highlight. So, and we can go back to this, put it up at the end of class if you want to write those down. Okay. Okay. Belief, step 1. Okay. Belief can fall away, so you must continue in my word. But anyway, belief can fall away if you don't continue in the word. What would happen today if you stopped coming to class and stopped reading the Bible? In about 4 weeks, hopefully you'd be missing it so bad you'd come running back here. Okay.
One of the verses that comes to my mind with this is, your word have I hid in my heart that I won't sin against you. If we have hidden his word in our hearts, if we have made it a part of us, if we truly believe in it,
Mhm.
then the rest of this falls in place.
Yeah. And hopefully everybody falls in that category. And this thing, if we went away for 4 weeks, our heart would bring us back here because we miss being in fellowship and being in the word. Belief becomes trust and indicating a commitment to the Lord. And that's what's kind of interesting here. If you look at if you looked at 30, which is the last verse that Steve did, and as he spoke these words, many believed in him. And that the way the word structure is, they truly believed in him. They became committed with him. They're following him on to this next conversation, as opposed to, if you abide in my word, these people are not committed yet. So there's two types of disciples. You're the disciple that hadn't committed yet, and there's a disciple who has committed. You just got to decide, I'm going to be the one that's committed. Okay. So belief becomes trust, indicating commitment to the Lord. You have to examine the evidence of Jesus. You got to read his word in the Gospels, and you got to be in scripture all the time. Okay. And then I pulled out something that's going to come up in chapter 20. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and believing you may have life in his name. These are written. What we're studying today, what we studied last week, what we'll study next week, these are written that you may believe. This is what you have to read in order to be committed. Okay, belief step 1, continue in his word, step 2. Okay, you got to look at scripture. Is the scripture true? Everybody here, I've had so many conversations with someone like, well, it was taken out of context. If you show me a Bible, I'll show you where it's taken out of context. And I've actually, I remember one conversation, I brought my Bible next week and he made the same thing. I said, show me. And he couldn't, but he had been told there's so many contradictions in the Bible. But I said, if you read the Bible and you think there's a contradiction, go back and read before it and read after it. And you'll find out the Bible never contradicts itself. From page 1 to the end page, it never contradicts itself. Humans can find it contradictory, but the Lord filled these men with divine knowledge. It was the inerrant word of God. So, okay, you got to read and think about it. And I know we've all been there where we didn't quite believe. It's a process again. And so you got to read it. Does it explain what's going on? Does it help you live your life? I know it does me. And, when we hear about all the stuff in Israel and Gaza and the Russians maybe coming in and, maybe going into Lebanon and all, you tend to go, oh, it's going to get terrible. It's going to, you know what? God's in control. He's moving all the pieces. He has the end game in mind. It explains everything if you believe that, and it gives you a calm and a peace. Even if I die today because of something Hezbollah does, I know where I'm going. Okay. So that gives you that peace. And that's where you come to when you read scripture. Okay. If you continue in my word, you will truly be my disciple. And you kind of was remembering Nicodemus on this, and you guys can fill in if you have something else to add. The word causes a transformation of the heart, and the spirit imparts life. And you remember Jesus told Nicodemus, here's a very educated man. He knew the scriptures front and back, but he didn't know how to be born again. Okay. And Jesus uses the spirit and the water as symbols for him and teaches him how to do it.
He
Okay.
knew the words, but he didn't know the truth.
Yes, exactly. He was very knowledgeable in the words, but he didn't know how to put them together, really. Yeah. And Jesus very simply put it together for him. Okay. So if you continue in my word, you will truly be my disciple. That's when you're transformed.
Can I?
Yeah.
What verses does it say, continue my word? Is that a different translation? I probably have a different translation.
If you abide in my word, that's verse 31. That's the same
If
thing.
you hold to my teaching,
Yeah.
Okay,
What
because
mine
mine says
says.
if you keep obeying my teaching.
Mhm. That's
It's a little different.
yeah. I think the meaning is still there. If you continue in my word, just, so.
Okay.
If you abide in my word, abide to me means I live in your word. I bring it into my life and I make it a part of my life and I make it how I act.
And I
So,
think the word obey is probably better for us today than some of the other words, because that's a commitment.
mhm,
To obey something is a real.
yeah. That's when you start thinking about the the meaning of words and their connotations sometimes. Some are better than others. I like the way you put it. I like abide, I like obey.
Yeah,
But-
because this makes me think of something called the commands of Christ. I don't know if you've ever heard that
No.
terminology, but there's been some studies where people have gone through the entire New Testament, picking out the actual commands that Jesus gave us.
Mhm.
And this kind of makes me think that he's telling us you should be following the teachings.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have that list somewhere?
I will get it.
Okay. That would be interesting to put into a lesson or something, maybe next week or maybe, whenever.
Yeah.
It's
That's
very good
actually,
lesson.
it's coming up in John where Jesus actually says, if you obey my commands.
Mhm.
So that is coming up later in the book of
Okay.
John.
Okay.
In this case, and this is just me, I guess, but abide literally means to remain in a place.
Mhm.
So if I remain, and in this case, in the word,
Mhm.
then it's gonna affect my life.
Mhm.
And it's gonna be because that's where I wanna be.
Mhm.
It's where you live.
Yeah, that's exactly, yeah. I equate it to abode. That's where I live. I abide, I live in the word. It's a verb. Yes, sir.
It has to be back when Nancy was having us memorize Romans 10:9. If you confess Jesus as Lord,
Mhm.
confess is a public acknowledgement, proclamation.
Yeah.
That you are a disciple of Christ. And it has connotations of, not just, anytime you encounter someone, you're saying, I'm a follower of Jesus.
Mhm.
I'm living my life in the way as a follower of Jesus.
Mhm.
I think that's a type of abiding.
Mhm.
And then in the second half of the verse, and believe in your heart, that Jesus raised him from the dead.
Mhm.
That's an internal belief.
And that's, what we're talking about, it causes a transformation of the heart.
There you go. So I'm seeing the same elements here that I
Mhm.
see in that verse.
Yeah. That's it. So, so if you continue in your word, then you become a disciple. And that's a process, but it happens, I would think, the more you're in it, the more it speeds up. Okay, if you don't, you're not yet a disciple. Okay. And we could talk about word meanings and the best word, because I changed one from honors to glorifies in here because I like the word glorifies better. Okay, so, okay. And I kind of blatantly stole these from one of the commentaries because it just said it so well. Sometimes I try to reword it and I go, it says it so well. You will know the truth. Step 3. If you continue on my word, you will know the truth. What an objective. Everybody wants to know the truth. Nobody wants to be lied to. Nobody wants to, be fooled. Nobody wants to be taken advantage of. What then is the truth? Again, I come back to what underlies all truth. Truth is the nature of things as they really are. Okay. We see a lot of twisting of that right now in the world. Truth is seeing through all the illusions, the dreams, the phantasmata, which is a word I've never heard before, but it's interesting. And the wishful thinking, there's a big one. All the facades and the unreal images, and getting down to the heart, the core of the reality. That which really is, that is the truth. I think a lot of us sit here and shake our heads. And if you're a news junkie, like Nancy and I tend to be, you just sit there and shake your head and go, why am I reading this? Because it's all lies and facade and shading and all that. But maybe that's one of those addictions that I have that I shouldn't have. I don't know. So, but anyway, I think I read it because I can discern the truth from it. And it makes me angry that there's so many people who lie to us. And here's another one.
And Kevin, I wouldn't shy away from that because Jesus made it very clear, watch for the signs.
Mhm,
And in the end times, people will become lovers of themselves
mhm.
and they will make up their own truths.
Yes.
And sons and daughters will turn against parents. And this whole, the signs are all here.
Mhm.
But you know what that does? It gives us a sense of urgency for the people that don't know Christ.
Yeah.
And so if we see time getting shorter and shorter, because we see the signs, I think that's a good thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we're supposed to, like you said, look for them, and they're all over the place right now. We're heading there fast. And here's one more I blatantly stole from one of the commentators. And this is what happens when you see the truth. But when you can see things as they really are, you can affirm what is good and true and permanent. When you come to see the truth, And it is a process. It does not happen all at once in a magic moment. This might take months, years, who knows? Okay, and it's always, you will change your whole value system and you will begin to understand what is happening. Okay, has everybody felt that transition in their life as they read this? I know I have. You begin to have greater discernment. Okay, and step 3. Okay, I did one for the Old Testament and one for the New Testament, that it's a promise that we're going to get this. And we know that the Son of God has come and given us an understanding that we may know him who is true. Okay, that's from 1 John 5:20. So we got a New Testament. We always talk about New Testament pointing back to Old Testament and Old Testament pointing forward to the New Testament. So here's an Old Testament. My son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you, so that you incline your ear to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. Yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver, her being truth, and search for her as hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Proverbs, okay, Proverbs 2. And I've heard that translated as the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. I've heard that before too. So I'm sure that's somewhere else in the Bible, but that's the Old Testament. New. Okay, so that's part of step 3.
Kevin, in with that, John 14:6, Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah.
No one comes to the Father but through me.
Yeah, that's correct. Because it's not, I am one of the ways. I'm one of several different paths. I am the way. You didn't know all those stuff was in those 2 sentences, did you? Pretty good stuff, isn't it? Just like God to throw something like this into the Bible, Okay. Truth will set you free. Okay. Free to do what? When you follow these steps truly, you'll be free to do everything you can be. How many times have we read about missionaries or people doing God's work that do miraculous things that wouldn't have been possible on their own? And miraculous things happen. Yeah. Okay, what will you be free from? Anybody? I got a list.
Sin, death, Satan, hell.
Yeah, in the end, especially, Who was I listening to the other day, talking about you're only going to live 2 places, and
Yeah.
death is not eternal. Death is temporary, and you're going to live 1 or 2 places, and you're not going to like one of them. So at all.
The Holy Spirit protects us
Hmm.
from sinning all the time.
Mhm,
So that gives us freedom from sin. Not that we don't sin,
mhm.
but if we didn't have the Holy Spirit, and we didn't then we would be sinning all the time, and always sin, but we're always trying to.
And that's a point we'll get to too. When you sin, you enter in basically a death in this life. You're dead in this life. You're dead to God because you're not following him. Sin is a form of death before we die. Okay.
And so what we're free from is really God's wrath.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Okay, here's the things that hold us from seeking the truth. Guilt. How many people have guilt about things they've done previous in life? And I'll raise my hand. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Now I don't feel lonely at all.
All 3 of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not true.
Fear is not, except the spiders, fear is not something that I experience. I usually, fools rush in where angels fear to tread, that's kind of unfortunately, my life. But fear keeps us from doing a lot of things. Oh, I'll fail. Okay. Oh, I can't do that. Somebody will think ill of me. Fear keeps us from seeking the truth. Anger. If you're angry all the time, you're going to be thinking about other things other than finding the truth. Okay. Pride. Gary talked about that this morning. Pride. Boy, proud. I've met a lot of proud people in corporate America. Oh my gosh. Oh, and enough said. Everybody's met them. So pride goeth before a fall. Okay, one more big one in verse 33. Oh, finally, Kevin, you're moving on a verse. Okay. Okay, John 8:33, the problem of self-sufficiency. Okay, can somebody read, project a little bit, 33 for me?
They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants, and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free?
Oh, well, they're Abraham's descendants. We forgot they're set apart from us. they've got it made, right? That is the problem of self-sufficiency, when you think you're okay already. Okay,
Talk about a short memory span.
yeah.
What about the Romans?
Oh, I'm going like, yeah, you're currently under the Romans. We've been bondage to Babylonians, Assyrians, who else? Egyptians. Okay, so, but what they're really talking about, and we'll get, I got a point here. They're not talking so much about the Egyptians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. They're saying they're not in spiritual bondage. And it's somewhat true. They've always been free to worship as they wanted to worship and worship their God. Okay, although they were corrupted many times, they left Egypt with a bunch of idols and stuff like that. And under some of the Babylonian and Assyrians, they sometimes adopted theirs. They had to be brought back under God once they were there. So they are not in spiritual bondage much. They're free to worship if they like, if they do that, but they really believe they're not in bondage spiritually. Okay. They believe they're acceptable to God purely because they're descended from Abraham. They're a chosen race and they're confident of God's approval. Okay. That's the problem with self-sufficiency. Everyone thinks they're okay just as they are. Okay. I should have put just as they are. That makes it more sense. So it also has a Billy Graham ring to it. So, okay. Jesus responds in 34. Does somebody want to read 34 for me?
Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave to sin.
We've talked about that. If you're sinning, you're a slave to that sin. Okay, if you're living outside the parameters of what God says is acceptable, you're a slave to that sin. And as we said, slavery is the opposite of freedom. You're not free to live the life that Christ can give you. Okay, so
That brings to mind last week's lesson. What did Jesus write on the ground?
yeah.
It had to be something
Uh-huh.
about sin and the people that wanted to stone
Yeah,
the adulterous woman.
yeah. Will we get to ask him that, you think? I sure hope so.
I said last week, that's one of the first things I'm asking. What did you write on the ground?
Yeah.
Twice.
I don't.
Yeah, but there's two separate interests of that too, yeah. So anyway, when you do wrong or follow wrong, you become a slave of that wrong, pure and simple. Okay, and you cannot be free. Yes, sir.
A point I heard a speaker make this week was we have, as believers, we have two entities within us. One is Christ and one is our sin.
Mhm.
And we are forgiven, but the one that we feed is the one that will be stronger.
Yes, yeah, I've heard that said many times, you know, it's, you know, and that's very true. So you gotta walk away, and the more you sin, the harder it is to walk away from it. The more it becomes ingrained in your personality and more it ingrains in your daily patterns. Okay. Okay. This is an interesting point, 35 and 36. Does somebody read that?
The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son does remain forever. So if the son makes you free, you will be free indeed.
These guys are saying they're the descendants and they live in the house of Abraham, don't they? Okay. But they don't say they're sons. They say they're descendants of Abraham. Okay. A slave can live in a house. A servant can live in a house. But eventually that servant and that slave will be put out. Okay. If you're a son by Jewish law, you cannot be put out. Okay. So when you accept Christ, when you commit to him and commit to the life that he wants for you, you become a son like him. He's a son and he makes you a son. Okay. Anyway, now I'll read my points. I went off on a tear there and just didn't went off on slide there. Okay, Jesus was pointing out that slavery is the opposite of freedom. Also, that these men don't know. They have absolutely no knowledge of the slaves that they are. They're a slave to believing that they're saved because they're descendants of Abraham.
And they're a slave to their religious
Mhm.
practices.
Bingo.
There's 613
Yeah,
rules
rules.
that rule over everybody.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I can keep 612, but 613, no.
It's just the straw that breaks the
Yeah,
camel's
yeah, exactly. Okay. They believe they are sons in the houses of Abraham, but they're not. They're slaves to that belief, as we just talked about. Slaves are eventually turned out, but if you follow Jesus, you become what he is, a son. Okay. In 8:37 and 38, we're going to talk about the cause of evil, a question of fatherhood. Somebody want to read 37 and 38?
I know that you are Abraham's descendants, yet you are looking for a way to kill me because you have no room for my word. I am telling you what I have seen in the Father's presence, and you are doing what you've heard from your father.
Okay, yeah, he's going, I'm a descendant of Abraham too. I'm Jewish. Okay, but don't I get that? No, I don't believe that's what gets me there. And what does he say when you're doing what your father does and what your father tells you to do? Who's their father? Yeah. Who's their father? Well, ostensibly it's Abraham. But really, it's Satan. Because Satan is the one that's giving him this delusion. So he's telling him you're following your father Satan. And he'll emphasize that here in a little bit. Okay, of course, he's saying his father is God with the big F. And if you knew me, you would know my father. Okay. Okay, 839 to 41A. Okay, and I know it's sometimes hard to break these up. I picked this picture because this is Abraham entertaining the three angels that came in the midday. Okay, and I think there was one other incident where he actually saw foreshadowing of Jesus. So it'll talk about that here in a minute. Somebody want to read 39 to 41A, just the first half of 41?
Abraham is our father. If you were from Abraham's children, said Jesus, then you would do the things Abraham did. As it is, you are determined to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did not do such things. You are doing the things your own father does.
Exactly. And that's why I picked this picture. Abraham entertained the angels. He entertained the messengers from God. He was true to that. You're not doing that. If you were sons of Abraham, you would listen to me because I'm talking to you about what my father says. Okay, and my father is God. But you want to kill me instead of entertaining me like Abraham did to the messengers of God. That all makes sense from that? That's kind of a weird set of verses to run through, but
And I'm
it's
looking
important.
at your escalation up here.
Oh,
You
yeah.
Just see the
Oh,
looks
yeah.
on their faces, they're red and.
Yeah,
about to blow their top.
I started to put numbers to those, but I figure you guys can pick it up. But good, thank you for pointing that out because yeah, these guys, I could just see their faces right now, kind of glowing red. Okay,
When they say Abraham is our father.
yeah, and we talk about for a Jewish man to say that he was God.
Hmm.
This is, I mean, he's gone from parables, as Steve pointed out last week, to speaking directly, and he's stating, "I am God." And boy, by the time he gets to the end of this chapter, which wasn't a chapter back then, but when he gets to the end of this chapter, there's going to be no doubt he's claiming who he is. We'll talk about that at the end. Okay. And I love this picture because you can tell they're all getting mad. Okay. And the one guy's going like, yeah, of course. And, but it's 841B. And then they said to him, we are not born of fornication. We have one Father, God. What do you think this jab's all about? They don't believe in the virgin birth.
They're attacking Mary.
Yeah, they're not attacking him. They're attacking his mom. I mean, they're
Good luck
basically,
with that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know about you, but somebody says your mom, man, the gloves come off, not Jesus. He's like,
But the gloves will come off someday.
yeah, oh yeah.
That day will be a bad
You don't want to
day
be
for
here.
them.
I got to tell a story on my nephew and niece. My nephew and niece are twins. And when one of them really makes the other one mad, she'll just text back, your mom.
Oh.
And it's his mom too, or her mom, so. Anyway, it's sort of funny, but what's funny is they do it and she's on the text, so it's, she just goes. Anyway, okay, so anyway, they're attacking him now. They've turned it from a questioning to personal attacks, ad hominem attacks, okay? So, but I love that picture because the guy in the back looks like he's going like, maybe. And this guy's going like, no. And this guy's going like, yeah, so there, so I love the picture. Okay. John 8:42, somebody want to read that?
Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me, for I came from God and now am here. I have not come on my own, but he sent me.
Basically, what he's telling them is what you do reveals who you are. And this is a part of him saying, if you knew me, you know, if you were sons of Abraham, you would know me, but you're not. So he's just telling them what you're doing reveals to whom you belong, which in this case is Satan. There was no shortage of angry Pharisee pictures, by the way. I just didn't want to avoid it. I think I ought to come up with a line of garden gnomes that are happy Pharisees. They don't exist, you know? Okay. So anyway, Jesus is going to end this conversation pretty succinctly, and we'll talk about it. And I've put together a slide so it flows more like a conversation. Okay. So Jesus completes the conversation. It will go on again after he does this. The Pharisees are threatened and they're angry by now. I mean, he's worked them up pretty darn good. Okay. Many of those who follow in Jesus are hanging on every word. Remember that he has followers from the previous conversation. He has his disciples, and they're eating this stuff up. They're hearing what he says and they believe him, but they're also hearing the Pharisees deny him. Okay. Remember, Jesus is supremely calm at this point. And it's just, have you ever been in an argument and you remain calm and the other person gets so worked up and they just fly off the handle?
And they get more angry because you are.
Yes. Yeah. It just makes them matter. Yeah. So it's just a little tactic in life, I guess.
Never at home though.
Yeah. Yeah. Not touching that one. Okay. And I just kind of wrote this thing out as the conversation. I asked him 3 questions. Okay. Why do you not understand what I said? I mean, it should be obvious, you know? I mean, I'm really representing God here. It should be obvious. Okay. And your scriptures tell you who I am. Okay. And he waits for a response and there is none. And this is what you can't, unless you read the commentary, sometimes you can't tell that he's kind of pausing here. Okay. And then he says, he answers the question for them. He says, it's because you cannot bear to hear my word. These words are falling on your ears like you're deaf because you don't want to know God. Okay. And he tells them why. Pretty direct.
Yeah, just a second. There's a point where strong emotions just take over thought process. And so what we're seeing here is the Pharisees have reached that point. They've reached that point where
somewhere in here,
where they can no longer access higher cognitive functions.
Yeah.
Because they're so emotionally triggered
Mm-hmm.
that they're just in defensive mode.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why you don't get a response to your last question.
Yeah, they're probably speechless and flustered. And plus they don't have an answer. You know, and that's flustering them even more. They're the guys that know God. They're the Pharisees. They've studied this all their lives since they were this tall. And here's a guy telling them, you don't know me or my Father?
Steve, is that why if you're looking at YouTube, doing protests and stuff, the 2 sides and stuff, and is that why the other side seems irrational? They're not responding to reason.
Yeah, and there's crowd psychology involved in that as well, that ramps up the anger even further and ramps up the emotional triggers. People trigger each other. And if you're looking at it from the outside, which is, this whole conversation is not for the Pharisees. It's for the people who are there listening, who have a different type of desire. But if you're looking at that kind of thing from the outside, you're looking at going, what is wrong with these people? They are so off their whatever.
And
Well,
there's no way to reach them.
No, because they have dug a trench and they're defending that trench with everything they have.
So the best response is just to
Avoid or de-escalate.
well, the other thing is that yelling and getting outrageous is a tactic.
Yeah.
When somebody's trying to speak the truth, you shout over, and we've seen a lot of that. Yeah. So anyway, he tells them why. You are the father, you are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there's no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources. I like it when it says he speaks his native tongue. Okay, for he is a liar and the father of it, but because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. So he's answering his own questions and they're standing there listening to him. Okay, there we go.
That's a really important turning point,
Mhm.
I think, for Jesus and the Pharisees and all of that. I mean, he just comes out and calls them what they are.
Yeah,
And it's, I mean, from that point forward, there is no
yeah.
rational thought related to Jesus.
It'll be interesting next
Jesus,
week.
what do they call it? Jesus derangement syndrome.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question. He's probably the only person in the world that can ask this question. He is the only person in the question that's ever lived that can ask this question and be fairly certain that nobody can convict him of sin. He says, which of you convicts me of sin? Crickets. Okay. If I tell you the truth, why do you not believe me? No response again. Okay. They're standing there flustered. Okay. They're angry as heck. They're probably spitting. They're so mad. Okay. But he tells them why. And this is pretty tough too. He who is of God hears God's words. They spent their whole life thinking they're hearing God's words. Therefore, you do not hear because you are not of God. Wow. Can you imagine somebody coming here and telling us that? We'd be angry. We'd be angry, but we would be calm too, because we know different. Okay. Okay. Okay.
It almost feels like earlier in the chapter, he was veiling it. And here he's just saying, you're the devil.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it just moves on to the point where, I mean, I'm wondering, is Jesus at the point of his own anger of turning the tables over for the money changers? You know, that took some righteous indignation for him to turn the tables over. Is he not somewhat righteous indignation
He
here?
might be, this might be a form of anger for him. But to Steve's point, when he taught and he says his time is short on anymore, he didn't have time to do it in parables. He's going from telling them directly to tell them really what they don't want to hear, telling them the bad news of who they are and who they serve.
And you wonder, this is also a way to set the timing for the road to the cross,
Mhm.
because the Jewish leaders have to be pushed to a certain point before that's going to happen. And you just wonder, God always has multiple dimensions of purpose
Yeah.
behind what Jesus is doing at any one moment. And so he's speaking to the crowd, he's speaking to the Pharisees, but it's really the messages for the followers.
And you will see as we go through the next 2 or 3 chapters, I forget which chapter it is that he goes to the cross, I think it's 13 or whatever. He's got a confidence now that they can't touch him. Because you'll see interspersed in just very different places where his time had not yet come.
Yeah.
He knows when his time is. He knows how much time he has to talk. He knows he has to say some very direct and unpopular and critical things because he knows at this point, I've got to go to the cross and die and then live again. But in between now and then, I've got to make some headway. So I'm going to be speaking even more directly. But you'll see that as we go through here. One time when he turns away when they're about to stone him, he said, and he knew his time had not come, so he turned away and disappeared essentially. So, yeah, I think that's part of the point. He knows his time is short. He knows when his time is, but he knows it's not yet, so he can speak directly. Okay, so these 3 questions end in a really stinging rebuke of these men, and these men consider themselves the utmost authorities on God. Okay, so after this, everybody goes home happy, right? Anybody read ahead? Okay. Okay, the gloves come off, not from Jesus too, but in a very calm way. Okay, 48 through 50, if somebody can read that.
The Jews answered him, aren't we right in saying that you are a Samaritan and demon possessed? I am not possessed by a demon, said Jesus, but I honor my Father and you dishonor me. I am not seeking glory for myself, but there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge.
Yeah. I like this. So what he basically doing is handing off the revenge or any judgment to his father. Okay. But I like this. He was like, all right, now first I'm illegitimate. Now I have a demon. Now I'm a Samaritan. Nobody calls me a Samaritan. No, he didn't get upset about it. He just goes on, and hands the revenge to his father. Okay. And what's the difference between the Samaritans and the Jews? They're really almost negligible to our point of view. It's about where the temple should be built, right? And that's about it. So anyway, but you're a Samaritan. Okay. So anyway, he didn't get too upset about it. Okay. The question was asked and answered. No, I don't have a demon. Very calmly. I do not have a demon. Okay. So far, he's been attacked for being illegitimate, a Samaritan, and having a demon, but he's brushed these things aside and he continues to speak the truth instead of defending himself. This is the perfect example of how to handle a personal attack upon yourself in a conversation like this. Be calm, speak the truth, and let the lies and the anger flow right by you. So easy to do. Okay. Like I said, it wouldn't hurt to find angry Pharisee pictures. So anyway, and just in case they weren't mad enough already. Okay. 51. Most assuredly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he shall never see death. What? You can keep me from seeing death? Well, he doesn't understand. Well, they don't understand the difference between seeing death and dying. Okay. So this is really, well, who are you to say I won't see death? Okay. Okay. If anyone keeps his word, they will not die. They will die, but not see death. We all know that. Okay. The Pharisees just couldn't understand this distinction. Okay. Okay. I don't think I need to go into that. We will die. Everyone here will die an earthly death, but in a blink of an eye, we'll be in eternity. Okay. We won't see death. We won't have that darkness or pain or anything like that after we die. Okay. Okay. So John 48 through 50. Somebody want to read that? Oh, wait a minute. I've already done that. Never mind. Okay. And just
52.
I'm gonna read this real quick. No. Nope. I duplicated my slides here. I even put a different picture on there. I think that's Anthony Quinn, if I'm not mistaken. The ubiquitous ethnic actor, he played a Pharisee, he played, let's see, a matador, he played a Nazi, he played all sorts of stuff. So, and he was Mexican. So good actor, I guess. Okay. John 51 through 53.
I'll tell you the truth. If anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. And at this, the Jews explained. Now we know that you are a demon possessed. Abraham died, and so did the prophets. Yet you say that if anyone keeps your word, he will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are?
Okay, it's got a lot of stuff in it. Okay, now we know you have a demon. What's that? You have a point?
No, we're at the top of the curve.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is in the cartoon where the little guy turns into a thermometer and his head bursts, That's what the Pharisees are doing right now. Okay, so now we know you have a demon. Abraham is dead, and the prophets say, if anyone keeps my word, you shall never taste death. Taste death is another one for see death. We know that. Okay, are you greater than our father Abraham, who is dead, and the prophets are dead? Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah are all dead. Jacob and Isaac are dead. Who do you make yourself out to be that you can say that you won't see death? Okay, who do you think you are? Well, this is not as bad as it gets. He's going to poke him a little bit more here. Okay, does everybody understand that we will die, but we won't see death? Everybody knows the mechanics of that. Okay, those of us who keep his word are truly his disciples. We will not see death, but pass from life to instant glory. We all know that. All right. To die without Christ is to pass from death, and a sinful life is a form of death in this life to death. Okay. And this is what is referred to in Revelation, which we studied not too long ago, as the second death. And I put in some things in there where it's referred to the second death. Okay. Jesus was speaking to them about a way out of this death, but they didn't understand. Okay. So in 54, Jesus is hinting at the resurrection to come. I read this several times and I had to go back to the commentaries to understand it. Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom that you say he is your God. Okay, so it's not me telling you all this stuff. It's not me who will glorify myself. It's my Father who will glorify myself. He's referring to the resurrection to come. Okay, he's telling you there will be a bodily resurrection of me, and I can have that same effect on you in death.
And
Okay,
he is the first fruits of the resurrection.
exactly.
And that's, they just couldn't wrap their brain.
Oh, I gotta put myself in their position. It would be very difficult to understand. Sometimes it's amazing to me. How did I come to believe? You know, I do believe absolutely, but how did I come to believe? It's difficult, you know, in some way. But once you believe, there's no doubt. So, okay. And then I put this in, this is a depiction of Abraham actually seeing Christ. I'm not sure what the context is there, but 55 to 56, yet you have not known him, but I know him. And if I say I do not know him, I shall be a liar like you. Yes. But I do know him and keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. What? Abraham saw this? He died 2,500 years ago. What are you talking about? He saw it through prophecy and he knew Jesus was coming and he rejoiced over it. So your father, Abraham, who you revere so much, saw me and knew who I was and knew I was coming and was glad in it. Okay. 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 And then this is part of it. And the Jews said to him, you are not 50 years old and you have seen Abraham? Jesus said to them, most assuredly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Okay. Then, okay, let's stop there for a second. When Moses was going back to the Pharaoh and he said, God, who do you want me to tell him sent me? What did he say?
I
He says, you tell him I am who I am. God, Jesus is telling him, I'm God. I
You'll
mean,
find that same comment in last week's lesson.
oh, did
I
I?
said exactly the same thing.
Okay, okay. I did watch your lesson. I just didn't come to I'm just doing his lesson over again.
No, you're not. This is great.
Okay, so anyway, I am, you tell him I am who I am. He's telling these guys directly, I'm God and I'm telling you, this is what you gotta do. Okay. Then they took up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. You know, we think of this in Hollywood, they would have you going up in a puff of smoke or spinning around in your cape. And he simply, when they got ready to stone, he just stepped off of what platform he was on and he was gone. He knew his time has not yet come. They can't hurt him. Okay.